that our meetings, and are open to the public here at City Hall, will continue to be available and streamed live on the city's Facebook page, as well as the Community Media Center channel and website. Now we'll begin, as we do every meeting, with the pledge of the flag, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Copies of tonight's agenda and the entire information packet that the council will be using are available online on the city's website. First, we'll consider the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from the meeting of the mayor and council on September 27th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Dayhoff and a second by Mr. Hoff. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have, the ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Before we go any further, I just want to mention that last Friday marked 1 month of service for our new city administrator, Sarah Imholz. We're pleased that she came back on Monday, despite all of our best efforts, I might add. So anyway, we won't make it a habit of noticing every month, but I did think after the first month we could do so.
Thank you, sir.
Certainly. We have a presentation tonight on Durbin House, the historic structure assessment final report. I know that's something we've been thinking about for quite some time. Mr. Grove of Grove and Alio Architects is here with us. Mr. Grove, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having us. And my name is Matthew Grove, Grove and Delalio. And with us tonight are the balance of my team today. We have Jay Bunce, and we have Alicia McCormick, F. McCormick Engineering, and Scott Grove with Grove PR. And we're all going to participate in this presentation tonight. So bear with us as we jump up and sit down throughout the course of the presentation. It's been a pleasure working on this project. Thank you all again for commissioning us. It's been a very exciting 10 months. We started in December last year, and it's been an amazing journey working together and working on the many facets of the Durbin House. In 30 minutes, we're going to try to convey a lot of what we learned, but certainly we can't convey everything to you. So here we are. I'm going to move it on. Matt, do we need to keep these on? Yeah. So this report is made possible by a grant from the Maryland Historic Trust, along with funds from the Corporation of Westminster. And it's been a pleasure working with Abby and with Heather and Zach and the whole crew at Public Works. Without those guys, we couldn't have been able to get in and see the building at multiple times in the course of the year. So I want to make sure we thank them. We also worked with many folks at Maryland Historic Trust and the State Archives, and we list them in the report too, because without them, this just wouldn't be possible. The report's made up of 7 chapters, essentially, the 8th being our appendices. And we're going to focus in on essentially the 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The introduction and administrative is just that, and it's something that goes with every historic structures report. But the scope of the project, essentially, as you all know, because it was in the RFP, is to analyze and evaluate the conditions of the Durbin House to better understand the history of it, the history of the ground it sits on, and also the history of the people that live there. And in the end, we look at it from the standpoint of what is the status, what is the condition of the house, what does it need to be put back in order? That's the direction the city wants to do, and how much that would cost. So all those things are combined in this sort of multifaceted study. One of the real treasures or finds that we had in the course of the project is working with State Archives. We found this 1938 archival aerial photograph. And this photo was broader. It took in the entire city of Westminster. But if you focused in, zoomed in, we found the Durbin farm. And see if this zoom in here. But you can see the farm up here in the upper left-hand corner. And what the benefit of this is that it shows us how access to the Durbin House and Farm used to be and what is today Tahoma Farm Road. And it traveled past the old stone quarry, the lime kilns, the old Durbin log residence, which is still there. And we know this from the aerial photography because this was the burned in route. And then later in the 20th century, this was the main route into the Durbin. And then today people access Durbin through Bell Road, I believe. But this is really helpful because, you know, this is interesting, but then when we zoomed in on the actual farm, it tells us, you know, a wide swath of information about how the farm was laid out and including the barn, the piggery. There's a structure here we call the wash house, might have been a wash house, but this structure over here, the spring house over further west and to the south, actually shows up in the 1979 photograph later. But there are all these other outbuildings, really sort of classic sort of 19th century outbuildings you had in a farm, and it really helped us understand how that farm operated. Here's a picture from, I think, circa 1971 when listing in the National Register was made for the Durbin. And there's a silo with it. And then this was an aerial shot from 1979 that was taken, and it shows the beginnings of the golf course construction. And this aerial shot was low-flying airplane took this, gave us some other information about some things, some later additions that hadn't yet happened here. So all of this helps us to understand the sequence of how things changed on the farm. Here's that spring house, and the spring feed is still there. They modified that, I guess, when they built the golf course and dug out a pond. But the day we were there in March, you can see the water bubbling out, and that feed's still there. And that's why the Durbin House was most likely built here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay now. He's going to talk about the geology of the site. Can you guys?
Sorry, are you not all excited about the geology? This is the best part.
Well, first, I'd like to thank everybody on my behalf for including me in this project. My background is in geology and archaeology. And what I did when I started with this project was I gained access to Maryland Historic Trust ArcGIS network, Medusa. And I went ahead and downloaded this map. Lost laser.
Yeah, let me give you this. Thank you. Yeah. Just don't shoot me in the eye. You got it. Oh, you know what? It's too bright. I think it's bouncing.
Okay.
You could just walk over and stick your finger
Yeah,
on
here.
it.
All right, I can do that. So after I gained access to Maryland Historic Trust database, I went ahead and gained access not only to the plot of land and its geo-reference of 170 plus acres, but I was able to gain access to all of the archaeological sites and cultural sites surrounding it so that I could piece all of it together, learn a little bit more about the relationship of the Durbin House to the other sites around it, the Lee Masters Iron Foresight, the Orendorff lime kilns, the other areas like that. But more importantly, it gave me an idea of the landscape and how the landscape may have been used. The other thing that, as an archaeologist, Maryland Historic Trust requires me as an archaeologist to do is not only to look at the historic land use of this property going back to the 18th century, but to look at earlier phases of human occupation of the site. So one of the things that I did was to look at this landform, and knowing my background in geology, I went ahead and looked at it from a very geologic landform point of view. And what I found was this is a very odd landform. If you look at the Piedmont, if you walk through the general Piedmont, you have V-shaped valleys, you have slopes, you have a lot of topography that is very, very steep. And this is a very flat, broad area. And this was my first clue that this was not a normal landform. And what I decided to do was to go further and a little bit deeper. And what I found was the Durban House property in the area of potential impact was part of the larger Wakefield Valley Syncline Valley form. Once I knew that, I was able to access Maryland Historic Trust documents and past research that showed a lot of that work being done by Dr. Curry at Maryland Historic Trust, that this valley system here had been used as a potential means of easy travel through the landscape by pre-contact peoples, by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. The other thing that popped out to me as a geologist is something you almost never see in the Piedmont. It's this tiny little yellow strip right here that runs into the Pipe Creek watershed. And on this map, which is the Red et al. Map, it doesn't clearly show it, but when I ground truthed it, that layer of material extends all the way up here to this spur, this knoll that sticks out into the area of potential impact. These are gravels that were created during the last glacial maximum. So these have the potential to hold material culture artifacts going back possibly 20,000 years. This required me to do a lot more footwork on this project than I normally do. In the Piedmont, normally the surface is completely eroded away. Everything washes down the stream systems. But because this area is the syncline bounded by the Avondale Fault, it has trapped all of the sediment in place. This is a very rare and unique situation. So one of the things that I did was walk the entire site, looking for this quaternary alluvium, looking for where it was in the landscape, and of course doing normal archaeological field survey, walking to look for flakes or pre-industrial artifacts on the surface. All those were point provenienced with GPS, using GPS and the Russian GLONASS system so that you keep track of artifacts within less than 1 meter that were found on the site. And some of the things that we found, and possibly the most exciting to me, was in an area that had been disturbed when the golf course had been created, was this flake of rhyolite. Now, rhyolite does outcrop in this area. We do have small rhyolite outcroppings, but they're not this type. This type is normally found in Pennsylvania, which means that this probably was brought in long distance. The other thing is the form. You have a nice spur right here at the end, and then you have retouch flaking along the edges. This is what's known as a spurred end scraper. And these are very, very common in Paleo-Indian to archaic assemblages. And that's a time frame between 13,500 to about 8,000 BP. So a very, very early and potentially diagnostic find for the site. One of the other things is this is not an isolated artifact. There are small flakes in 2 clusters on the site. And I'm going to recommend that those areas be further investigated. If these are in situ Paleo-Indian pieces of material culture, this could be potentially one of the most important sites in all of Maryland. But that needs further research to verify. Doing an additional soil survey of the site, I've identified areas that potentially may have sinkholes. And let me go back real quick.
We got lots of sinkholes.
Yes.
Oh, we have sinkholes.
But this spur that comes out would have enabled people thousands of years ago to look down the Wakefield Valley syncline for over a mile. So if you're a Paleo-Indian hunter-gatherer, if you want to see large mammals to hunt, this is your perfect vantage point as they're moving through the landscape. The other thing is the entire landscape would have been different back then. It would have been much more open. It would have been more akin to a Russian taiga. So small stands of fir trees, not as much soil. So they would have been able to see all of this. Located down here, based on a soil map, the Sergo GIS soil map, and also my ground truthing, there's likely a large sinkhole there. And due to the presence of carbonates, calcite rocks in that area. The calcium has the potential to preserve biological material, bone. So if there were any animals that fell into that sinkhole, their bones potentially, even tens of thousands of years later, could be preserved in that area. So you have at least 2 areas that are Paleo-Indian into Archaic on the site, and then you have a potential sinkhole that may contain fossil material as well. Now, as Matthew has mentioned, the Durbin House is adjacent to a spring. And that spring would likely have been used by pre-European people as well. It's also situated in the geology in such a way that the bedrocks, which are metamorphosed sedimentary rocks that were part of an ancient ocean, they're full of salt. So it forms natural salt licks. Most of that has been washed away over the last 10,000 years. But that would have caused, or that would have led animals in the area to preferentially come to this valley, not only from shelter from the winds coming off the Laurentian ice sheet and other things like that, but because of the natural resources here. So you have this area that has the great potential for preserving and also maintaining human habitation going back 15,000 years. It's also the same reason why the Durbins chose to build their house there. There is no heavy evidence, or significant evidence rather, for human habitation into the woodland period. That is from about 3200 BP until contact with Europeans. I did not find any diagnostic smaller flakes, edge flaking, or other stuff like that. There's no pottery on the site when I was doing the field walking. However, I did come across these 2 artifacts close to a relic waterfall. You have a preserved waterfall at the site, which probably dates to the Younger Dryas, about 12,700 years ago. And close to that, I located these 2, what are known as cupstones. So as the Paleo-Indian period ended, it went from a taiga to more of a boreal forest, like you would find in northern Canada, lots of fir trees. And it slowly transitioned to having small patches of deciduous forest, oaks, hickories. And at this time, Native people started to harvest acorns and hickories called mastable resources, and they would grind them up. And that's what these cupstones were used for. They're used for grinding those materials. They're very, very common for the Middle Archaic, roughly 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. But the fact that there were 2 of them close to the surface is indicative that you have resource extraction going on this property, and this needs to be explored further. So with all this in mind, I went further and continued field walking. I did find some of the remains of the outbuildings that Matthew spoke about. There is a dump on that knoll where they demolished some of the outbuildings of the Durbin House, and they spread it along an old fence line there. I believe that underneath that, we may have preserved human habitation, cultural material. I did work one other golf course site a few years ago, and what we found was wherever they built a mound for the golf course, underneath that is intact stratigraphy. So wherever there's a mound, you're likely to have intact cultural material. All this will need further work and more work to verify, but I am excited about this, and I hope that my geologic background and my archaeological background for this report will not only help you understand the Durbin House and the resources that the Durbins were extracting during the 18th century, but to also look at how people up to 15, 20,000 years ago were also using the resources in this area. There's one last site I'd like to mention. This one particular cupstone right here is made out of material from a basaltic dike that's been metamorphosed. And there is an outcropping of the same material on the back of the knoll that I pointed out. That is probably a quarry site, so you also have them quarrying the local material. You have all of the geological material. The iron that Lee Masters was coming here to smelt in his forge would have been used to make ochre for paint. The limestone would have also been used for paint. All of the resources and the landscape are conducive to human habitation, and there is also physical evidence for human habitation going back at least the archaic, possibly. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Matthew.
Great job tonight. I'm not sure how I follow that up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I worked on the social history and let's see, so I didn't get the orientation on this. Is this what I need? Yeah, the button on the right side. On the right-hand side, move forward. Okay, there we go. Thank you. You know, basically studying the owners of the Durbin House. This is a complete listing of all those owners over the course of time. And the social history of the Durbin House and the farm really offers a broad brush study of early Westminster and Carroll County. The story begins with Samuel and Ann Durbin, who were newlyweds from Baltimore, who moved to this area in the 1720s. And they were a courageous lot, as was everybody that was moving here at that time, because at that time, this was really the western frontier in the mid-Atlantic region. Matthew mentioned earlier that they built a log cabin that's on the Tahoma Farm Road. It's still there. And during their time, they raised 13 children. Some of the children moved to Kentucky. Others stayed here, including their firstborn son, William, who pieced together several parcels of land that would comprise the core of what is now Wakefield Valley Park. Here in 1767, William constructed the first section of what is now known as the Durbin House. Durbin and his wife Mary had 8 children who undoubtedly were very involved in the operation of the farm. Given the lack of tools, much less machinery, establishing new farm was a greater endeavor than at the time. They could only basically tame, several acres of farm land each year, but little by little they did. Locally, initial harvests included tobacco, but they were replaced soon after with stable corn and wheat crops, something that was introduced by Germans who were migrating to the area from Pennsylvania. William was apparently a successful farmer. He raised hogs and sheep, as well as planted rye and wheat. He was successful. Noteworthy about William and Mary Durbin is, of course, their conversion to Methodism. William Strawbridge, who was an Irish immigrant, moved here in the 1750s with his wife, and he was establishing the first Methodist groups in America. And he did that here in this area. He and his wife had a home near New Windsor. I guess you're all familiar with that. And but anyway, the Durbins befriended the Strawbridges, and the Durbins were a regular spot for Methodist meetings or church services. I mean, as we would think of them today. Succeeding members of William's family did remain in the Methodist Church. Other research findings that were discovered included the Durbins' participation in the French and Indian War, their later support of the American Revolution, their participation in the development of local schools, civic affairs, business, and religion. They were very involved. While the Methodist Church initially declared slavery the great national evil, the church split on this issue in 1845, creating the Southern Methodist Church, which condoned slavery. Although there is no evidence of slave ownership within the first 3 generations of the Durbin family, Nicholas Durbin, who appears to have been wealthy, did own several enslaved men and women on and off throughout the years. This change may have occurred following his marriage to his first wife, Catherine, who inherited several slaves herself. The farm and its owners continued to prosper. It remained in the family for 4 generations until Andrew Durbin sold the farm in 1869 to a retired doctor who just had ownership of it for 3 years. The farm was then sold to Benjamin Bixler in 1872 and remained in family ownership until 1963, when Anna Marie Engler Beard sold the house and farm to Dr. L. Earl Griswold, who was chairman of the sociology department at Western Maryland College in McDaniel. Griswold carried the Durbin and Bixler traditions for a long period of time in the 1800s. And then, of course, in the 1900s, it was largely a dairy farm. And so anyway, and in the late 1970s, he was doing it. Griswold was, both teaching at the college and then, raising these cows. So it was not a full-time occupation. And I guess at some point, he just got the better part of him. But anyway, in the late 1970s, he initiated the property's redevelopment
as a residential golf course with the hope, his hope was to retain as much green space as possible on this farmland while, there being some development as well. So that was his goal. And I suppose Hank Majewski caught wind of this and then, had a greater vision for it and purchased the property from Griswold in 1979. And I think from that point on, you all are very familiar with the history. But the farm, what I think is interesting about it is that with the exception of 20 years prior to it becoming a golf course, this farm was owned just by two families. And this, shows the real connection between the farming that families have in their blood, and that's what I think this story really is about. It's about farming and families. And it tells a great tale of Westminster and Carroll County. Are there any questions? I buzzed through that. The report that you have is a lot more comprehensive, but
We'll have questions at the end.
okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So the report focuses in on the architecture of the building too. And while Scott was doing the research, yes, we are brothers, by the way. He was doing research on the family. We were digging in and crawling on the house and trying to figure out what came first, second, third, and fourth, and so on. And I kept calling Scott and saying, what do we know about the family? Because oftentimes things happen to the house when major changes happen in the family. And eventually we did get that information, pulled together and thereby that information did essentially fit with our estimate of change to the house. We'll get into that here in a minute. But so Division 6 focuses on the physical conditions of the house. We look at it piece by piece, part by part. This is a limestone building, would have been locally quarried limestone. It would have been plastered with earthen plaster on the inside and outside. And the condition of the plaster to our eye looks good, but as Alicia pointed out, what we're looking at isn't mostly the original plaster. It was replastered with a Portland-based product at some point. And that may be why it looks so good. I don't know, because the limestone can tolerate the limestone. We're looking at the windows, and the windows tell a great story. You've got 6/3s, 9/6s, 2/2s. And all those windows come at different times in the history of the house, and they again are clues to what came first, second, third. And the great news about the Durbin is that the windows, there are enough extant samples of these windows to replace those that are missing or damaged. Couple sashes are missing here in the back. And then the doors, the exterior doors on the ground floor are pretty much all gone. But before I go to the next slide, I just point out the metal roof on the building is covering up cedar shakes, which is the original roof. This metal roof is probably 100 years old, but we believe can be salvaged and coated and saved. So good shape, good news for the roof. On the inside, we've got some nice examples of interior doors. Here's a 4-panel raised going up to the attic. And then there are batten doors in other parts of the house that were early doors could be from the 18th century. Here, this casing here on the right is from the northern block of the house, which we're estimating was built in 1850. And the wonderful part of that is that while we're missing the door, we have all this inset panel work, which tells us exactly how the front door is paneled. It had a low panel and then 3 smaller panels up above. So again, there are enough cues here to tell us how to put things back together. The fireplaces are quite interesting. We've got some fireplaces here that could very well be from the 18th century. This first one on the left is upstairs in the middle section, which we think is the oldest section of the house. And someone probably in the 20th century came along and stripped the paint off of it. But nonetheless, you can see the millwork and wainscot chair rail around the perimeter of the second floor, which ties into the windowsill elevations. Again, sort of a standard detail from that period. Downstairs, when it was turned into a golf clubhouse, they attempted to follow the pattern upstairs, but it's a modern addition because the chair rail doesn't match up with our windowsills. Here's a, sort of, this looks like a throwback to a bread warmer or some kind of warming cabinet next to the fireplace. And then other treatments in the report that we document are the conditions of the ceilings and the walls and the floors. These slides depict some of the different conditions. We still have the earth and plaster, we think, on the inside of the building. In some cases, the walls are furred out with modern drywall. In some cases, walls are removed. This is the large room downstairs that includes the southern block and central block. And at one point in time, there's a staircase in at least two other locations we figured out. So this staircase is the addition that came along when the back kitchen was added. That is presently the only way upstairs. So in breaking it down, we looked, this is the front elevation of the house. We believe the center block was built in the 1760s as reported. It has the central block has a cellar. And then the south block, we believe, was built soon after. I mean, there's very similar features about it and qualities. Could have been less than 5 years. It could have been sooner than that. And then we think, based again on the details that remain in the house, that the kitchen addition was then built, because there's evidence in the attic. When we go to the attic, we can look back at the back wall of the south block and see that there was painting above what was an exterior window facing that section. So, and at one point there was a terrible fire that burned the entire roof off. So the roof shingles we see up in the attic now are not the original roof, but again, quite old. Easily could have been from 1800 or even earlier. And that leaves us with the north block, which we believe was added in the 1850s. It's funny because in the entry to in the National Register, the person writing the report thought this was the oldest section. But if you spend 10 months in the building, I think you get to know it a little better. So, and in the future here, Alicia's going to talk about some of the conditions in the house, and she'll refer to south block, central block, north block for reference. Here are the floor plans, and I'll go through these quickly, but there's a basement in the center in the north block, and then crawl space in the other sections. This is odd jog in the wall of the center section. I'm not quite sure why that was. Either it was a stairway, early stairwell down to the basement, or maybe a built-in for a cupboard. First floor, essentially about 900 square feet here in the front section of the house. The kitchen, sadly, the fireplace has been rebuilt completely, so there are no details of the early hearth. I think the footprint of the hearth is accurate, and the placement of things is accurate. And then the second floor, we see the divisions again of the south, central, and north block, the kitchen addition. And it's interesting how at some point in time, there was an effort to really pull all the different additions together, make it look cohesive. And that's why we see 2x2 windows across the top, 9/6 down below. But that's not how it was earlier on in the appearance of the house. Here's that slide showing the back side of the south block. And here they actually painted in sort of a fake jack arch on the stone to make it look like, cut stone jack arch, but in fact it's decorative painting on the outside of the stone. The other thing that Doug Reed, who was a preservation consultant who worked with us, was surprised at the size of the attic. It's really unusual. Now we're going to pass it over to Alicia, who's going to talk to you about the structure.
Well, I'm here to, my part of this was to assess the structure, the visible portions, to get an idea of what was salvageable, what needed replacement, what the limitations of the uses are based on the structure that's there. This is sort of an unfortunate picture to start with. This is in the central block, in the cellar, and these are the most magnificent termite trails I've ever seen. Needless to say, termite treatment is necessary if it has not already been done. I almost assumed that it had. The first floor of the central block is I requested that it be cordoned off so no one could be hurt in that area. It's such poor condition. Let's see here. Okay. I progressed to the report basically section by section, starting in the two-story center section. This is the roof framing over that area. It also extends, the same roof framing because of the fire, extends over the south block as well. What's typically in roof framing and old structures, if you run the numbers on it as a structural engineer, you wonder how it ever withstood any snow at all. But miraculously they do, and I actually feel like the old rafters and roof framing are really fine the way they are. They did at some point take collar ties out, and I do believe that they should see. You can see the pegs there. I do believe that they should go back in, but that's a whole study for another time. So the central block, you see how I ran this slides here, okay. The central block, first floor is a wreck, and we don't know. We were talking about potentially replacing the joist in kind, their log joists and well, some log and some sawn. But something has to be done. It's unsafe as it is. This is a view under the south block. These are actually beautiful hewn joists. They could not get up in there. And they actually looked to be in remarkable condition, parts we could see. I believe that the span is quite long for the depth, and there's a good bow in it. But the here it looks like there are stones tucked underneath them, sort of midway that help. This needs more investigation, but I'm very hopeful about this area. However, the floor sheeting is in very poor condition with termite damage. But termites and other insects prefer certain species to others, so we might be very lucky here. This is the second floor of the south block. You can see quite a bit of deflection in these joists. Similar joists are over the center block, but they're supported by a beam which may have replaced a wall at some point, but we're not sure about that. Surprisingly, these joists, even though they're very deflected, are capable of supporting very light residential loading without much intervention. So that's good news. This is evidence of the stairway, which is in the south. East, thank you, southeast corner. You can see the peg from the old newel post. And here we are in the basement of the north block. The floor framing is actually more robust because it has already has a beam across it. But here we are with our friends again. But there's been a lot of remedial work done in here. Some of these joists have been sistered, which means you just put better material, new material next to it to reinforce. And if reinforced, if the bad members are reinforced, then this can actually take a fair amount of load. I think I determined it was as much as 75 pounds per square foot, which is suitable for the public to be walking around in safely and for maybe exhibits or the like. So there's a lot of potential in the first floor of this, in this area. This, my favorite, another termite trail. This is in the north part. This is an old stairway that was framed in. This is a typical joist, but not all of them are in poor condition, as I said. Here's this is access in the cellar. There's another joist. Really, I'm very excited about that. Okay, this is the kitchen. Sorry, this is the kitchen wing, and you can see that there's stone up to this level, and then from then on, it's framed. To the best of my knowledge, it's framed on a ledge. There's quite a step up to here. This floor framing was the floor frame below here was visible, and because it's such a small space, small span, again here, assuming wood in good condition, which you can't really assume it. You have to look. You have to take finishes off and do a full investigation. But this would be suitable for either residential or light office loading. And you get to the exterior. So in this room up here, there was a lot of slope in the floor toward this corner. It's visible in the wainscot, the chair rail. It's perceptible as you walk across it and very visually apparent. And the joists are set into the stone. They're pocketed into the stone. And there didn't seem to be anything disturbed there. I didn't see evidence that the ends of the joist had rotted or so on. So I was really scratching my head, especially because when you look at this, you don't see cracks. They're really no more than hairline cracks. The exterior is actually in very good condition. The stucco is. So my thought was that it was a result of quite a bit of settlement in this corner. Downspouts non-existent, or poor drainage and so on, and it settled. And they decided, well, we'll just live with that, and when they stuccoed it, and there's no evidence of any further movement. So that's good news. The porch is in terrible condition. It would need to be completely rebuilt. See, these rafters have completely separated from the house. I'm surprised that they haven't completely fallen down. There's a huge dish. It might not be so evident. And back to the roof. This is a fairly straight roof line for an old house. There's a fair amount of deflection in the rafters, you can see, but there's not a huge saddle. There's a little bit more over here. I never have a good picture, but this whole floor system is rotted out and unsafe to walk on at all. The piers are probably salvageable. No one's really talked about these pieces of building other than the historic stuff. This is the old concrete block, bathrooms and so on. It's a concrete block building that's been covered up with this siding to make it look not like a concrete block building. And it's really in reasonable shape except for the roof framing. There's a crack in here. This been a little foundation subsidence here. This is what we're calling the sunroom, and there's nothing left of the framing that's worth saving. The foundation may be salvageable, though. We have to do some investigating to see how deep it went. Maybe it's not underpinning in the future. All right.
Thanks, Alicia. Now we get to possible uses and interpretation. I'm up here representing my colleague, Ruth Billabaki. She and I put this section together, and I had a lot of fun doing it as well, I should say. So I need this. This is kind of a line listing of different possible uses. The first possible use would be visitor center. You know, this is a 187-acre park with numerous playing fields, trails, programming, and events, and likely, it's like other parks, thousands of people will pass through it during the course of any given week in warm weather, spring, summer, fall months. And to have a visitor center where people can be directed throughout the park and have access to restrooms would contribute to the visitor experience that they'll have, and also elevate the distinction of the park. As in terms of, it could also be very well be an interpretive center. The house could serve as a interpretive center where different aspects of the house and grounds, both family and farm, could be interpreted through exhibits and or through docents that would be on hand. Interpretation could take the form of related programming, such as talks and workshops that are conducted by subject experts, which could expand upon subject matter related to the house and the farm. Another very possible important use could be that as a meeting site. To preserve Durbin House has enormous potential as a meeting site. The 600 square foot first floor meeting rooms that Alicia just described could provide a distinctive meeting location for groups of up to 30 people for government meetings, corporate retreats, civic groups, and more. And also, too, they offer the potential for generating income. On the other side of that, it could also serve as an event site. Both the Durbin House and the grounds could provide excellent locations for events. Outside, the city could construct a large pavilion or seasonal tent for public and private events, excuse me, or a dedicated space in which the lessee could erect their own tent for rental. What would be important about this would be that there would be handicapped access and there'd be access to restrooms. But again, all of these could potentially generate great revenues for the park. Alicia pointed out that the second floor occupancy can really only be used for office. At best, it could serve as an apartment, an office, or perhaps even an apartment and combined office for the park manager, someone who's on site. So then we get into the interpreted exhibit themes, and of course, one of the most obvious one are the landowners. Most who visit the house will wonder about who owned the farm all those many years, and this could be really interesting to represent those family owners and correlate it against a national timeline. Another theme could be domestic 19th century farm life. Farming for most of us is far outside of my daily realm, at least. Maybe it is for yours. But 19th century farming even farther. Specifically, the hard work associated with the work that is today mechanized. And this could be communicated through exhibits, workshops. Some fields could be reserved for planting, creating an educational experience outside. The farm outbuildings that Matthew pointed out on the map, they could potentially be recreated the spring house, the ice house, the bank barn. Or at the very least, they can be interpreted through wayside exhibits that are out on site. The whole outdoors here is an outdoor classroom, really. Another, thing that people may think could be great would be that as a house museum. It's an obvious choice, but house museums are kind of complicated because it's generally important that furnishings that are in the house be those that are related to the family members, or at least of that time period. And one thing too is that during the past decade or so, house museums have kind of fallen out of popularity, in the world of museums. However, it may be that, there could be one or two pieces that would be, permanently in the house that had a functional purpose, but also could have interpretive purpose as well. The sky's the limit here, really. There could be botanical trails, walking trails created for Wakefield can serve, multiple purposes in addition to exercise. They can help educate and create stewardship for the land, landscaping with using native species, conservation gardens, butterfly gardens. These are but a few of the ideas to bring depth to the actual trail experience. Again, to help, I would suggest working with conservation groups who could be solicited and contribute to it all. Another thing that's popular with people when they travel for this as well is birding. Sections of the Wakefield Park might be designated as unofficial bird sanctuaries with trees and grasses that attract birds could be planted. And again, this is a teaching opportunity. Local birding groups might help in this endeavor. If the trails are out there, then probably it'd be a good idea to educate them as to the wildlife that they may encounter. And this could be done through wayside exhibits. The same is true as with the ponds. With fishing, there could be exhibits or interpretation related to aquatic species, plants, water plants as well, that you're going to see. That's kind of the list that we came up with. Then, in terms of the different types of interpretation, I thought we'd just sort of give you a broad overview on that as well. The first type is on-site interpreters. These would be people, this is really an effective way, an engaging way to inform forms of interpretation that, or they're engaging to visitors. And this can be done through a docent or a historian. Visitor desk staff could serve both in dual roles. They could greet people as they came into the house, but they could also have a firm handle on the interpretation within the house and general orientation to the outside. Permanent exhibits, these are commonly used, as you know, in exhibits, or museums rather, and they're intended to remain in place for a decade or more. There are many types of permanent exhibits. They're flat panels, they're display cases, multimedia, and more. The opposite of that, I suppose, are movable exhibits. And this is a really good choice if that space is going to be used, that first floor space is going to be used for a variety of purposes. Examples of movable exhibits include exhibit kiosks on casters, which is what we see right here, where the exhibit can actually close up and move to another portion of the room. They're retractable video screens and also reversible wall panels that can be turned so that if another event is going on there, the exhibits sort of go away. Something else to consider, and this is really good in terms of attracting or re-attracting, I should say, audiences to, any kind of museum, are rotating exhibits. And they offer specialized content that's intended to attract return local audiences, but also have the potential to attract new audiences as well. A great example of this is the Museum of the Shenandoah over in Winchester. And they constantly have, new shows that are coming in that bring locals to it, but then also attract people from other locations, encouraging them to visit the museum for the first time. I've already sort of touched on this, but wayside exhibits they're really a wonderful, excellent, and affordable means of interpreting the landscape. And really, any kind of interpretation that is done that relates to the outside should really be on the outside. So they offer 24/7 interpretation and flora, fauna, agriculture, outbuildings, aquatic species and more. Once again, the German farm, it really offers an amazing outdoor classroom. Technology is another way, the incorporation of digital content accessible from smartphones opens up all kinds of possibilities in terms of interpretation. And then finally, this is slightly different from the other things, but wayfinding is really important. Getting people to your facility and then once there, providing an orientation that, because this is 187 acres, getting them, around the park and helping to ensure that they have a really good visitor experience. We were asked to put together,
But that's the aerial view.
oh, is it? Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, I like it though. We were asked to put together recommendations and, Ruth and I put our heads together and this is what we believe to be a really good response to that. And that is that the Durbin House should serve as a combined visitor center, interpretive center, and meeting site. It can do all those functions. It can greet the hundreds of people that will just walk through because they happen to be there at the park, because they've dropped their children off or they're there to check out the trails. There can be interpretation inside of the house. And also too, the 600 square feet on that first story serves as a terrific meeting site. And also too, it can be a really cool meeting site because on some level the interior is preserved. It would be very distinctive. Second floor occupancy, again, we talked about that before, but ideally, it'd be great to have someone upstairs who was on site, 24/7 basically, or most of the time. And anyway, a park this large will need to have someone on premises, that can help with the management, but also has interpretive skills as well. We advocate the use of movable exhibits so that, all these three functions, the visitor center, the interpretive center, and meeting site can be used. And we just think movable exhibits make the most sense. These exhibits can be selected based on how easily they can be changed. And that is one thing that's great about it is, with that type of exhibit, it can be easily changed. It can be, which I think you always like that option of. Staffing, whenever the house is open, we believe it'll need to be staffed after the investment that's made into its preservation. And so it seems that, volunteers, a bevy of volunteers will be needed. The other thing too that we recommended was establishing a friends nonprofit organization that could help to raise funds and support the work of the park. This group would be involved in coordinating those volunteers as well. Another thing that's important, establishing partnerships with allied cultural and park sites and local interest groups. So these groups could actually help you develop the park to offer what is needed. Actions?
Yeah,
Is there time?
I don't know.
I'm sorry. Well, anyway, just one thing that we think would be really important is that if you go forward in terms of it being an interpretive center, that you do interpretive planning, that a plan be put together that will, really help guide that. And also that the park be branded in a consistent visual manner. This is a really special opportunity, and anyway, it's very lucky that you all have this kind of resource to work with. So thanks very much.
I believe we overshot our time.
I'm sorry about that.
But thank you guys. We did have in the report a proposed reuse, so take some time and look at that. It outlines what Scott and Ruth worked on. And anyway, thank you guys very much for this. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Rose or his colleagues? Mayor,
One,
please go ahead.
and I'll, very short, in lieu of time, I just wanted to say, I never thought I'd be sitting in a council meeting listening to words like Laurentide ice sheet, last glacial maximum, younger dryas, and not to have them being said by me was even more impressive. But I read the full report. It was fantastic. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, and indigenous people today especially, and I think, that would have to be an interpretive task. Yes, that's what I thought too. Okay.
Well, we're looking forward to having the mayor explain all those terms to us. In the meantime, I did get a chance to look through the report, and thank you for walking through it with us. It gives us a lot to think about. The one question I would ask is, as we look at the condition of the house, what's the most critical thing to do to prevent any further decay? And can you give us a rough idea of what that would cost?
Yes.
We ran out of time.
Well, no, it's in the report. There's 7 items that were most critical that Alicia and I worked through.
Right.
And those items were actually included in the grant request that Abby made, I think back in March or April, perhaps. And it was successful, I believe. And so we have a cost estimate for those 7 items, but they include things like window restoration, coating the roof, restoring the floor in the center block. We have a list.
Termite treatment would
Termite
obviously be.
but we hit the critical and most serious items, and which would essentially keep the house in a way sort of mothballed until the next monies become available.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Gruber, did you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to thank the team. They were amazing to work with. This is a very exciting project, and I look forward to our preservation steps that are coming in the future. So be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Sorry to make your meeting longer though.
That's all right, thanks so much. While we're here.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We have no hearings tonight on the agenda. We have one item on the consent calendar. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
President, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. Let's go ahead. Right, yeah.
We need to get the consent calendar.
Right, sorry, let me get that, yeah. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. You guys seem to have it, the ayes have it. Consent calendar is approved. Madam Mayor, your report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a couple things to report. I'll make it short. Last Wednesday, I presented the request to the delegation. Council member Dan Hoffman, council member Ann Gilbert were also there. They were well received at the public hearing, and so we got some feedback from the delegation that was there, and we'll be sending on a letter to Governor Hogan for a request. Oyster Stroll, it was just fantastic. I spent some of the day in and out of downtown Merchants as well, and they were really thrilled with the day that they were having on Main Street. And I think it was probably one of the best events we've had this summer to date, as far as the crowd, and everyone really seemed to enjoy that very quickly. I'd just like to say thank you to the Chief Ledwell, for his work and accomplishments this past week in keeping the community safe, especially following the bank robbery and apprehension of the suspects shortly after that at the Farmers and Merchants Bank. I have a meeting scheduled with McDaniel next week. So part of moving forward with McDaniel is working with some of their students during the January term. And so I have a meeting scheduled with some of the first year dean and some of the individuals involved in scheduling January term events for students. And so we hope to use that 4-week block that the freshmen are required to be on campus for Jan term to get them more involved in things in town. And so we're going to start to put some items together for that, hopefully next week. And then finally, last but not least, Halloween trick-or-treating. So thank you, Councilmember Dayhoff, for pulling up the literature for this, or the memo for this. So each year, the mayor and council designates a night for Halloween trick-or-treating. I guess this is pursuant to the approval of the council, October 11th. I'd like to recommend that Halloween trick-or-treating take place on the evening of Sunday, October 31st, 2021. Trick-or-treating should be conducted between the hours of dusk and 8 p.m. and be restricted to children age 12 and under, plus accompanying adults and adult guardians. Residents who wish to participate by providing treats to children should turn on their lights outside. Children are advised to wear some light-colored clothing as to be more visible to motorists and go to their homes in the neighborhoods with lights. Motorists should pay a particular care on the evening of October 31st with so many children walking around the city streets. I know our neighborhood gets very busy as soon as dusk starts with kids on the streets. And so do take care that Sunday evening as we host trick-or-treating. And that's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. So Halloween will be on Halloween.
Halloween will be on Halloween.
As it always is in the city of Westminster, and I think that makes the most sense. Unless anybody has any other concerns, I think, we endorse the mayor's pronouncement.
Definitely.
Very good. Thank you. All right, thank you. Let's move quickly through the reports from the standing committees. Our liaison to the Arts Council, Mr. Dayhoff.
No report, Mr. President. Programming continues at the Arts Council, and we're really excited.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dayhoff. Mr. Hoff, the report from the Economic and Community Development Committee.
Just real quickly, we had our meeting on October 6th. We had several agenda items that we have moved forward to council, some of which you're going to see tonight. And we are continuing to work on other long-term projects. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hoff. For the Finance Committee, I'll just report that the meeting we had planned last week has been rescheduled to the 19th. And I thank everybody on the committee and the staff for their forbearance on having to change that. Personnel Committee, Ms. Gilbert.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Public Safety, Mr. Kavachi.
A couple quick items, Mr. President. The mayor alluded to it, again, commending the police chief and his department in the arrest of the individuals that we believe were probably responsible for the bank robberies that took place. The department worked real hard during the Oyster Stroll, making sure everything was kept safe during it. And of course, we're always very appreciative of that. I'd like to commend the chief personally. He has been instrumental in the establishment of the Opioid Overdose Response Protocol Project. And without going into too much detail in the essence of time, basically, he worked hard with that group to bring in about $309,000 into the community through the health department. And they're now putting that money's in hand, and it's being put to good use to help treat and cut down on that problem that we all know is quite the plague nationwide. So we're really grateful for the work you did there. That goes above and beyond, your regular responsibilities of being the chief of police here. It shows you genuinely care about the community, and we're really grateful for that effort. So thank you, Chief. I got to sit here for probably the past 2 or 3 years and almost consistently report that crime has been very low, and the statistics have been fantastic. And that's still generally true, but it would be disingenuous if I said it was exactly that, because things have picked up a little bit. We've been busy. There does seem to be a little bit of an uptick. Not sure exactly what that relates to. Probably some of that back to that opioid issue. Some of it's just having folks that are in town that like to rob banks. But the bottom line is, I know that the chief and his department are working exceedingly hard to really make sure that doesn't get out of hand. I know he enjoys a good relationship with our sheriff. And I know he's, willing to help and step in anytime that he can as well. So we're appreciative of that. And hopefully if, the public that is watching or whenever this gets reported, obviously if anyone sees anything, they've got to step up and say something, because that's how we end up getting good information. So that's my report, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kavachi. And we'll just roll right on into Public Works. Do you have anything to add?
Real quickly, same thing, Oyster Stroll, Public Works, you're over here now. Public Works did a great job working hard, man. I'd left town at about 6 o'clock in the morning to head out to Pittsburgh. The morning, unfortunately, I wasn't at Oyster Stroll. I came back about midnight that night, back into town, and it's as if it never happened. It just was unbelievable. It came up and down that quickly, just
Believe me, it
amazing.
happened.
I know, I saw lots of pictures. Amazing job. Also, our pure water project is continuing to move along. It's making good headway. It's getting some attention. And I think even more people are paying attention and getting involved in it. So we're very excited about that. So keep up the good work. That's it, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kavachi. Recreation and Parks, Mr. Dayhoff.
No report. I'll defer any additional Recreation and Parks reports to Director Gruber.
All right, thank you. And I have nothing for the Technology Committee. We'll go quickly through council comments. When council members get a chance to bring up anything that isn't part of the regular agenda or committee report, Mr. Dayhoff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had the opportunity to attend a reception for one of our latest murals in town, and we're really excited. Shannon Scott was the artist who did the work at Johansson's outdoor dining area on West Main Street in Westminster. And we're really excited. We are noticing a number of murals. I think the, who has the laundromat? Amy, yeah. Amy's laundromat has a nice mural on her wall there, and that's pretty exciting. And if I may, would it be okay to give a brief report on the MML Fall Conference? That would be good now. I attended, Ann has attended, and Mr. Huff has attended also. And I'll what's that now?
Gilbert.
Ms. Gilbert, yes, of course. Thank you. I was trying to just sort of glide by that. Okay. But I'll yield my time to Mr. Huff as far as the LARs in the opening session this morning, the legislative action requests. I attended, we all attended a number of different sessions. I attended the session on mental health and the small town forum and accessible municipalities. And it was a very good session, very time really well spent. I enjoyed the networking, talking with other officials from other municipalities. It's pretty fascinating how many similar problems that we're all working with. And it's good to get other ideas from other municipalities and municipal officials as to how they're tackling those problems. I believe that's my report, Mr. President. Ms. Good.
Councilman Dayhoff pretty much said all of my comments for the MML. Again, I'm going back tomorrow for the second day. So I'm going to look forward to some more knowledge that's shared amongst all of our colleagues. As far as the Oyster Stroll, which has been already mentioned, I just want to thank everybody and all the department heads, because I know it's mainly Public Works and Parks and Rec, but all of our department heads have a piece in Oyster Stroll, and it takes a huge amount of time outside of their normal, 8-hour workday to put off an event like that, like this. And it would never happen without our dedicated employees and our dedicated staff. So I just want to thank them all for all their work. It was a good day.
Just one quick thing, Mr. President. You mentioned that it is our administrator, Ms. Imhouse's first full month on the job, and I'd just like to compliment her for crushing it in your first month.
I'll just mention a couple things pretty quickly. As far as MML and the legislative priorities, they're going to be voted on tomorrow at a general membership session. But the two priorities I think I already mentioned before were the highway user, the restoration, long-term restoration of the highway user fees to municipalities, and then also giving municipalities the ability to have their own police accountability board instead of having to go through the county. I mean, just theoretically, that makes sense. It's not, we would have the option to have our own board. We would not be required to, but certainly theoretically, it makes sense that if we choose to have it, we should be able to have our own police accountability board. And then otherwise, I just want to say, again, I am new here. I've only been here since May, but being able to see the staff in action again and again, I am impressed with, as a citizen, you observe it, but you don't really realize all that goes on behind the scenes to make some of these events happen, and all the collaboration and coordination that happens through all the different departments and how well they all function together. And I think Mr. Kovaci mentioned it, and it's not just internally, we have really good collaboration and cooperation, outside as well. I know, I'm thinking of Chief Ledwell here I serve on the Opioid Prevention Coalition with him and all his efforts in that regard. And I know the sheriff also speaks very highly of him. And that collaboration and coordination is so important for us to have in the community, and that we all are trying to work together for the benefit of our citizens. So that's my only comment.
Just a few quick things for me. First, my thanks to everybody. And Oyster Stroll, another great event. I certainly enjoyed it. And the thousands of other people on Main Street also seem to be enjoying it. So good work by all the city staff on those. Really from Fall Fest right into this, the Recreation and Parks Department, the Public Works Department, the Police Department, the whole city staff, the Finance Department has to make sure that bills get paid, everybody is on deck for these things, and certainly, just an impressive job, to get these two big events done so quickly, and I know people enjoyed them both very much. Also, add my appreciation to to the chief on the success of the opioid response effort. Very impressive, and pleased that we're able to do that in our community. It's a going that welcome to street department business owners and others. And really appreciate the way a lot more community policing. I think that's really the notice. Thanks again for that. I had the chance to listen in on the meeting of the District Commission the other night, and I was really pleased to see, a commission that gets a little sleepy, pretty engaged in the discussion. Thanks to Mr. Depot and his team for the support they've given them. It's great to see citizens really involved and passionate about some of the things that I think are important as we try to rehabilitate our downtown, particularly some of these historic preservation issues. And excited to see what comes next with that. I know that Mr. Hoff is on that. It's chair of the Economic Community Development Committee, taking interest in that as well. So looking forward to see what comes out of that from the committee. Finally, just I just want to say thank you to my colleagues and to the staff for everybody's kind words and condolences. That last week as we lost my mother, it's deeply appreciated by me and my family. So thanks to all of you for that, and a lot. And that's all I had. I think now if it's my colleagues, what I'd like to do is I know that we have some guests here tonight, and we sat with some things that I hope was interesting to them. But I'd like to go ahead and discuss the adoption of resolution number 2105, amending the adopted water and sewer allocation policies for 2018-2024 and the accompanying master distribution chart. Ms. Depot, would you like to start us off on that? Thank you. The Board County of Carroll County Commissioners submitted a water and sewer allocation application on January 16, 2020. The site development application S2103 for April 27, 2021 for a new Carroll County State's Attorney's Office project. Currently, there's not enough water allocated for such a public use project. On July 27th, 2021, amendments to the water and sewer allocation policy amendments allowing the ability to transfer water from one property to another public project's own property, and to the master distribution chart amendment reallocating water for public use projects were introduced to the Economic and Community Development Committee. The committee supported the proposed amendments. On October 6, 2021, the committee reviewed the draft text amending the water and sewer allocation policy and master distribution chart as previously introduced.
The committee supported the provided draft text and moved that such draft text be forwarded to the mayor and common council resolution, which is resolution 2105 in the staff report as an attachment. And that resolution does reflect the policy direction of the committee. With that, staff recommends the mayor and common council approve resolution 2105 as recommended by the Economic and Community Development Committee, amending the adopted water and sewer allocation policy for 2018 to 2024, and the accompanying master distribution chart as outlined in the October 11, 2021 Mayor and Common Council report to include the following amendments. 1, amend the water and sewer allocation policy to allow for the transfer of water for public projects only. With the approval of the Economic and Community Development Committee and the owner of the property transferring water. And 2, amend the master distribution chart to reallocate 500 gallons per day in 2021, 627 gallons per day in 2022, 2023, and 2024, for a total of 2,380.81 gallons per day, from the commercial industrial category to the public projects C category, through the new state's attorney's office public project. This time is fourth, I'm available for any questions, and I believe we have people from Carroll County and state attorney's office present to answer any questions as well. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have questions that they'd like to introduce them? I read on this, the Economic and Community Development Committee about this when this was discussed. It's not really every opportunity to raise some questions there, but you and I have spoken a lot back about the project, how it's going to sort of occupy the footprint of the land there. And one of the questions I asked parking for the facility, that there's no parking on site. That goes along with this, and what are the plans to be able to mitigate that? The parking is tight, and the area so that folks, the nearest residential neighborhood, not been impacted by the parking around the aspect of there's and parking was an initial issue that staff had brought to the attention of Carroll County as far as with the first submission of the site plan, because there is no parking on site. We have requested that the applicant provide and demonstrate how they would provide the requirements of the ordinance, which ultimately is the Planning and Zoning Commission's responsibility at the time of site plan approval to approve the site plan that meets the requirements of the ordinance, in this case parking. The applicant, my understanding, is looking at using parking within the area that they own to meet the parking requirements of this project. So we have asked for a parking study to demonstrate that that parking is actually available. But in the end, as I stated, this would go forward before Planning and Zoning Commission for approval, and we would have to demonstrate compliance with the ordinance. Also was, again, I regret that I was doing that. So it's a significant transfer of the ability that we have from commercial industrial category into the public use category. What thought we get into either at the right of the existing jobs and it's land that isn't, in the city of taxes. What's the analysis on how to take away opportunities for that land to be used to create economic activity so that's we transfer that in this allocation. But it is taking water from the commercial industrial use category. So anytime you do take water from those categories, it certainly would affect any future businesses or coming forward for development. We did break it out through multiple years, so we're not impacting any one given year. still would need in any given year about, I would say 6,200 gallons per day in 2022, 23, and 24. So again, as you say, it would certainly impact anybody else that would come forward for commercial industrial use. I think the uniqueness element about this is we are still gaining water. That's the transfer element. It's taking existing people in the courthouse and moving them to this new location. So that's the purpose of the transfer, some ability for public use and purposes. And through some extra work, we were able to get that number down as good as we could get to the number we're asking for. But certainly would impact any other business going forward. Any gentleman from the county like to show you additional information on the project? If I may, I'm John Bowers, your chief, Carroll County Department of Public Works. To Mr. Bucco's point, we are actually actively working on our evaluation study at the moment. Working with our architect, so that is something that we are actively working on, finalizing some concepts by the end of this month. And working very closely with the state's attorney's office on this project. It's a very pressing need for them and their staff. They're maxing out their current opportunities there. So we appreciate all the work that Mark and his staff have done to bring us to this point on the water allocation. It's a pivotal point for us to take the project to the next step. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, Mike. State's Attorney for Carroll County, and I too would like to thank you for considering this amendment. As Mr. Bowers said, it's an extremely important project for our office moving forward. Essentially, the space that has been allocated to us in the courthouse exceeds our needs at this point. We've had a recent expansion of, most importantly, our evidence review unit, which we just created, which is a response to the requirements of body-worn cameras. And as you know, not all law enforcement at this point have been allocated body-worn cameras yet. So as they are allocated these body-worn cameras, it's going to increase not only the work in our office, but the need for people to review these videos. So we anticipate that we're going to need more space than we have. So this is an essential project for us moving forward to continue to do what we're doing. So we greatly appreciate the city's consideration of this amendment.
Sure. What's the timeline for the project?
We are looking to put the project out for bid probably January of next year, with hopes of breaking ground probably second, third quarter, this or annual quarter of 2022. And it's probably 18 months plus build out once we actually get started.
Any other questions or comments from anybody else?
Mr. President, obviously we want to be cooperative as we can. We have a good relationship with the county, and we certainly like to try to be helpful. But my concern is I think a point you were trying to, I think get to, and as is typical, I'll just use the more hammer approach. We're looking to take money away from commercial enterprises that we are pushing very hard to try to grow. We've got folks talking about hotels. We've got our own desire to put a potential hotel right there or something like it at the intersection of 27 and Main. And taking that water away from those uses, could significantly impact our ability to do those things. So this isn't something we can just, I think lightly, make that decision on, especially because it doesn't sound to me like you really are all the way baked in the oven when it comes to parking, and parking is a problem. Just please don't take offense, but just saying that there's a study and that you're working on it, that's great, but that's not actual parking. So for me, I think we probably need to table this until we have a little more information and know that if we're gonna yank water away from these commercial enterprises and disincentivize them from even trying to come to us because there won't be any water, because that's gonna happen. We're gonna have people now that are not gonna want to do things because they know they can't get water because we're giving it away for other things that may not even come to fruition in the time frame we're talking about. Again, we want to be cooperative. We want to work together. We want all of our agencies working together here in the county. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to have to hold off on this until we get a little more information, Mr. President. At least that's where I'm at.
Anyone else have any thoughts or comments? I think, in some discussions earlier with my colleagues, I think that, the questions I raised and what Mr. Crotch just said, I think is, I think we'd like a little more time to be able to think about where we stand on this and see if our staff can continue to work with the county, see if we can get some resolution on some of these issues and bring this back in the near future. I mean, as Mr. Crotch said, we want to be cooperative. I'm sure that we'll find a way to be able to get to this in the near future, but maybe a little more staff work will help us get there in the next couple of weeks. So without objection, we'll postpone the decision on this until then. Great, thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. And we'll move back into our regular order for the agenda. We've got next item is bids. We have two items under bids. The first is approval of locker room renovations for the Family Fitness Center. Ms. Gruber.
Yes, good evening. The fiscal year 2022 capital projects budget provides funding for family center upgrades, specifically part 2 of renovation to the men's and women's locker rooms. As you may remember, last fiscal year, the city invested in phase 1 of locker room renovations, providing new shower rooms at both the men's and women's locker room. Now we're looking to complete the renovation process. The remainder of the locker room facilities, including the changing area and the restrooms, will be upgraded with this project. The request for bids was posted on email and marketplace on August 26th. 10 contractors responded with bids ranging from $42,185 to $236,893, which was interesting.
I just love some of these people.
Right. So we carefully reviewed the submissions. We do that anytime there's a great disparity between the lowest and the highest bids. Staff did determine that the lowest bid submitted by Boulevard Contractors Corporation from Owings Mills, Maryland will meet the city's needs. Boulevard Contractors submitted a thorough proposal, references were checked, and staff received a favorable response regarding the company's timeliness, quality, and integrity of work performed. With that being said, staff recommends the city award the bid to Boulevard Contractors Corporation in the amount of $42,185 for renovation of both the men's and women's locker rooms at the Family Fitness Center.
All right, very good. You've heard Ms. Gruber's recommendation. We have a motion to approve the bid locker renovations contract.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the recommended bid.
Thank you, Mr. We have a motion from Mr. Hoff. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion from Mr. Hoff and a second by Ms. Gilbert. Is there any further discussion or any questions for Ms. Gruber?
Mr. President, I just want to make a comment, having talked to Mr. Glass, just to kind of better educate myself on this process. I appreciate the fact that staff takes the time also being in the commercial arena myself and dealing with contractors. It's not just an issue of whoever is the cheapest. You also take the time to vet to make sure that we're dealing with when we receive the lowest bid, that is a quality contractor. And I appreciate us taking that extra step because as I have well learned in life, sometimes signing up with the person who promises me the lowest price doesn't necessarily turn out to be the best thing. And as I've gotten older in life, I do a lot of vetting behind the scenes, which it appears that you all take the time to do as well. And I appreciate that extra effort because I do think that's important to do as well. So thanks for those efforts in that regard. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hoff. Any other questions or comments on this? Ms. Gruber, I was just curious. So what's the budget for this project? Do you know offhand?
I believe we have $65,000.
Very good.
In the capital fund.
Good. Well, so you got extra money for gold-plated fixtures then.
Excellent.
There you go. Glad to see Ms. Impulse is paying attention.
My blood pressure just.
All right, hearing no further discussion, after that, move on to a vote. All those in favor of approving the bid, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. The ayes seem to have it, the ayes have it, and the bid is approved. Congratulations, we can get to work on those showers. The next bid item is City Hall roof replacement. Mr. Glass.
Yes, sir. The current capital projects fund includes funding for the replacement of the roof at this building. Project was advertised on August 6th on email and marketplace with a pre-bid meeting and bid due dates of August 20th and September 20th respectively. Project includes the removal and replacement of the slate and shingled areas of the roof, including, of course, the final cleanup and debris removal. All work will need to be completed before the spring of 2022 to meet the fiscal year end dates. 4 bids were received, and they ranged from $99,650 to a whopping $305,000. You will take note in the bid summary that pretty much the lowest 3 were within reason of each other, with the 305 obviously being an outlier. City staff has reviewed and evaluated the references and the proposals from AKJ Incorporated as their low bid and the total amount of $99,650 and finds it to be acceptable with regard to the city's needs. The total project budget is $140,000, so it's potential we'll have a little room there. At this point, the staff recommends that the Mayor and Common Council accept the bid of AKJ Incorporated of Stevensonville, Maryland, up to the full budgeted amount of $99,650 for the removal and replacement of the City Hall roof, including all work necessary to complete the project as further described in the bid documents.
All right, thank you, Mr. Glass. Any kind of a motion to approve the,
I'll move, Mr. President.
thank you.
Seconded.
There's been a motion by Mr. Kavachi to approve and a second by Mr. Dayhoff. Is there any questions for Mr. Glass or discussion?
Mr. President, I just have one. Mr. Glass, how old is the slate roof that's currently on this building?
We believe it's original.
And when was this building built?
1838.
What did you say, Mr. Day?
1838.
1838.
Wow, okay.
It's original.
It's not uncommon for slate roof to last that long.
Slightly, it's a long time.
Mine's original.
Is your house built in 1838?
No, much younger. Much
Yeah,
younger.
no, I was gonna
I've got
say,
another
that's a
100 years
long
I'm looking to
time.
get out of it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
100 years on a good slate roof.
Mr. Glass, when do you think the work might commence?
It's expected to be yet this year before the cold weather hits.
Okay. Well, as the person who came in here one morning and heard the leak, because the water was coming in at quite a pace up on the second floor. I'm glad to see that quickly it got fixed, patched, and I'm glad we're going ahead with a more permanent fix.
So, Mr. President, one quick comment. I was really surprised at that price. I had gotten an estimate on my house, which is not as big as this, and it was significantly more than that. Just out of curiosity, I had somebody give me a number and it was higher. So I thought this was going to be probably $200,000 for this roof.
So the budgeted amount of 140 is that's
There you
really
go,
where
yeah.
we thought it was going to come in. But we checked everything out with AKJ. They actually replaced the slate on the state capitol dome. So
I was pleasantly surprised to see that number.
Maybe you can get an add-on to it.
And Mr. Glass, just the type of slate that's being used is a kind of slate that you're comfortable with for your research as well. Because I know, having investigated it, like Mr. Kavachi for my own home, that there's different grades and qualities. So the grade and quality of the slate that's being used is acceptable to you.
it was specified, so they'll have to meet that specification.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. Right, very good. Well, having been cautioned to be less humorous by our city, I will behave myself and we'll move on to vote.
And the
All those in favor, and the city administrator as well. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it. and the bid is approved. Thank you, Mr. Glass. Next item on the agenda is the, under ordinances and resolutions, introduction of ordinance number 938, an ordinance amending chapter 164 zoning and subdivision of land of the Westminster City Code to amend Article 1, general provisions, section 164-3, definitions and word usage, to add a new definition of satellite automobile storage, to amend Article 10, IR restricted industrial zone, section 164-54, special exceptions, to provide for satellite automobile storage excluding car washing facilities as a special exception use, to amend Article 20, special provisions, to add section 164-155.5, satellite automobile storage, to provide new standards for the grant of satellite automobile storage in certain zones, and to amend Article 22, Board of Zoning Appeals, section 164-166, action prior to hearing, to repeal section 164-166.f. And we will turn to Mr. Depot for an explanation of all of that.
Thank you. As President Pecoraro pointed out, there's two elements or items with this text amendment. The first is the satellite automobile storage lot. The city, just as background, was approached with a request to locate an automobile storage yard in the IR zoning district. This use, however, is not allowed in the IR district or anywhere actually in the city. So on July 27, 2021, a new satellite automobile storage lot use to be allowed in the IR zoning district was introduced to the Economic and Community Development Committee. The committee supported the concept of the storage lot use in the IR district. Staff returned to the committee on October 6, 2021, in which they reviewed the draft text allowing satellite automobile storage lot as a special exception use in the IR district, with a caveat that this use is only for existing automobile storage, sales, and service businesses located in the city. So in other words, an existing automobile sales lot in the city could take advantage of this use. If it was outside the city, you could not come in. The idea was that the city did not want to be a repository for storage of vehicles and losing a lot of that IR district, which we really want for industrial commercial type of use. The committee supported the draft text and recommended that the draft text be introduced to the Mayor and Common Council, which it is tonight. The second element is the special exception process. Pursuant to zoning ordinance section 164-166F, the board shall refer all petitions for special exception to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its report and recommendation. Therefore, thereafter, the commission may, in its discretion, issue a report and recommendation. So this requirement essentially adds an unnecessary step to the special exception process. After a special exception, if approved, would typically go through a site plan process, which the Planning Commission would then approve, make sure it meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. So on July 27th, a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance, section 164-166F, was introduced to the Economic and Community Development Committee. The committee directed staff or supported this draft text, deleting that section in its entirety. So on October 6, 2021, the committee reviewed the draft text, deleting this section, and the committee again supported the provided draft text and recommendation and recommended that the draft text be introduced to the Mayor and Common Council. Again, these two, we consolidated them into one ordinance. So staff tonight is recommending that the proposed ordinance 938 as introduced for consideration to the Mayor and Common Council on October 11th, 2021, be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its review and recommendation to the Mayor and Common Council. And that completes my report. I'm available for any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Depot. All right, let's get a motion on the floor. We have a motion to approve introduction of ordinance number 938.
I will make a motion to approve the introduction and refer to Planning Commission.
All right, thank you. A motion by Mr. Hoff and a second by Mr. Cavacci. Let me just say, I want to thank Mr. Depot and his staff. I thought we had a very productive conversation about this in committee on a couple of occasions, and I'm really pleased that we, worked out the idea of, ensuring that the city, continues to derive, economic benefit from this type of activity by, requiring that, this used to be available to an existing car sale, automobile sales business that's located in the city. And I think, as we said in the committee discussion, we want to be helpful to existing businesses in the city, but we're under no obligation to go out of our way to give up precious, land that can be used for other things to businesses that are active outside the city and therefore not creating activity within the city limits.
Sort of like water.
Please, we're able to work that out.
Mr.
Hoff.
President, I just wanted to note that having looked at a lot of text amendments over the years, having been on Carroll County Planning and Zoning Commission, I just want to commend staff because the draft that we received on the committee level, it's pretty much what you see right here. And it is not necessarily normal for me to receive a draft of a text amendment and read through it and not have any changes or look at it and go, well, that was really smartly worded or smartly done. And I just want to commend you all because when I read through it, I was like, it was really well done and crafted. You even had the termination part in it that, for instance, if a dealership moves out of Westminster, that kills the satellite use. And that's part of the deal, that we're allowing this use as a special exception to try to help our already existing dealerships that are within our municipality. So I just want to commend you all because I think it was very well put together. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hoff. Any other comments or questions from Mr. Depot?
So President,
Ms. Gilbert?
I just have a brief question. So I understand that when I was reading this Coons of Westminster Toyota was who is pointed out in the information. So are they no longer using the mall parking lot? Like is this in addition to? Because I know they were using the lot that's right across from Kia. Is that, what kind of prompted the need for the use on the Meadow Branch area? I'm just curious.
Using the mall parking lot, again, it's not a permitted use in the city, so we did allow those dealerships to temporarily use the mall dealership with the understanding that they would have to move as the mall is getting more business back in. So I think this pushed dealerships to look at other ways of where else they could locate. Coons is located today outside of the city, but they do border the city. So ultimately, Coons would have to annex into the city of Westminster to take advantage of this use, which they are fully aware of and anticipate to do.
As is all the other dealerships using the mall lot, like Honda and et cetera, because at one point, almost all of them were parking their vehicles there.
Yes.
It really looked like our mall was busy.
Yes, exactly. We've been in communication with the mall and about those dealerships and again, on a temporary basis, but that temporary time is coming up.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mr. President, the great thing about this particular ordinance is it allows, these dealerships to stay where they are and not have to relocate to a bigger lot. And by having that satellite lot, it gives them some ability to ebb and flow depending on the marketplace and other market conditions. So I think it's a good thing.
All right.
Mr. President,
Mr. Dehoff.
I don't share everyone's comfort on this because I'm concerned that I'm not sure it's the highest and best use of the restricted industrial zone. I have found what Mr. Huff was saying to be relatively compelling and persuasive. In other words, may I ask Mr. Huff a question?
Sure.
Mr. Huff, so you're looking at this as helping support local businesses. Are you address that I'm uncomfortable using restricted industrial zoning for this purpose? I'm not sure it's the highest and best use.
I understand, Mr. Dayhup, what you're saying in theory, but in theory, if they don't have a place to, if I'm a dealership within the city of Westminster and I don't have enough space currently, and therefore I have to find a larger place, then I'm moving out of my current place, going and taking up other land, now admittedly maybe commercial, but maybe something else too. That I don't think that we're suddenly gonna have, I don't think our whole IR is gonna be taken up with satellite automobile storage lots, because correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Depot, I think we only have 3 dealerships that are technically even within the municipality right now.
Two right now.
I'm sorry?
I think it's 2. We have Honda, Len Stoller is developing now, within the city. But everybody else is outside the city.
Yes. So, you know, I think we're trying to be helpful to the existing businesses. And, you know, the fact of the matter is we probably still have IR land left out there, Mr. Depot, correct me if I'm wrong, that's undeveloped.
We do, and this is the type of use, it's surface coverage, it can be used in the future for redevelopment.
Well, good point. It can be redeveloped because you're talking about, it's a story.
Like the storage, like storage facilities.
Well, not even that, because it's a parking lot.
A lot of buildings have to be torn down or.
Correct,
or moved.
okay.
It's more surface that you're gonna see out there that can be easily redeveloped in the future. So that's what we look for too, as IR does get more attractive and businesses are looking. That could be an option that they then convert or sell and then move further, maybe out to the county, maybe some other location. But again, the primary goal is supporting the businesses we have in the city, because they are limited to expansion. And we don't want to lose those businesses.
And we have a dealership that wants to come into the city for this very purpose.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I love getting people that are already on our water and sewer system to actually come into the city. But don't get me started on the history of how that ever came to be.
Right.
But
Thank you, Mr. Hoff. Ms. Zimholz, did you want to make?
No, I was just agreeing with
Okay.
Councilor Brown.
Right. So, Mr. Dale, I share your concern. You know, I mean, I'm always, you know, concerned about, you know, uses of the IR, you know, land that, you know, 'cause I think it is in short supply and we want to see it used to really generate economic activity. In this case, as Mr. Hoff said, I think the opportunity to keep these businesses located in the city and have, rather than have them move farther out into the county where they can acquire perhaps a larger piece of land that will allow them to house everything on one site. Yeah, this makes some sense for us, you know, and it is something that allows itself to be temporary by its nature. You know, it's easy enough to tear up, you know, land that's turned into a parking lot essentially. You know, if we find if a higher, better use comes along, and somebody's going to do more with it. So I think that's still got retain that opportunity. So I think, but your concerns are legitimate. Something I always worry about in the IR zone. So I appreciate you raising.
And Mr. President, this we've seen this pattern before with Carroll County. We've seen this pattern before in other municipalities. They have industrially and commercially zoned property, and they're looking forward to it being utilized, and maybe it's not being utilized in its highest and best form. I'm still not comfortable with it, but I think I've had my concerns addressed by Mr. Huff and by you.
And this is for introduction tonight, so there's no
Okay.
chance to discuss it. And if you have some more, if you'd like to learn more, I'm sure Mr. Depot would be glad to. get you some more.
And these folks clearly understand that they need to be annexed.
Absolutely.
I'm excited about that
Absolutely.
because they're benefiting from the economic contagion that exists in the city of Westminster, but they need to fully contribute to the resources that, okay.
Very good.
Very good. Thank you for addressing my
Right, there's
concerns.
no further discussion. Move on to a vote. I remind everybody, this is just for introduction. All those in favor of the introduction of the ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Next item is adoption of resolution number 21-06, appointing a resident agent for all purposes for which such agent is required by the provisions of the Maryland Annotated Code, Local Government Article, Section 1-1301. Ms. Imholz. I think this maybe is this you or Ms. Levan is going to explain this.
You go ahead and take it. You are required by state law to appoint a resident agent, which is a person or entity that receives service of process. It's a little bit redundant in the case of municipal governments because the law provides otherwise for service upon you as the officers of the corporation. However, in compliance with state law, we had previously appointed Ms. Matthews as, or Ms. Visosky. It may have been Ms. Visosky. It had been merged both before. And since those persons are no longer with the city, it is appropriate for you to appoint a new resident agent. And Ms. Umholtz has agreed to serve in that capacity.
All right, very good. Thank you, Ms. Levan. Is there, may I have a motion, please?
So move, Mr. President.
Second.
Thank you. All right, so.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Gavachi and a second by Mr. Dayhoff to adopt resolution number 21-06. Any discussion or any questions for Ms. Levan? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it. And I would just note that we are by this action appointing the city administrator, Sarah Umholtz, as our resident agent. To get that into the record. And with that, the resolution is adopted. Thank you very much. All right. There's no unfinished business of which I'm aware. There's no new business of which I'm aware. So we'll move on to departmental reports. Ms. Umholtz.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'd like to start by talking about the Oyster Stroll this weekend. This was, of course, my first chance to attend the Oyster Stroll. I thought it was a spectacular event. It was really well attended. I was happy to see so many of you there. There are quite a few volunteers that are required for any of these events as well. Sometimes they don't necessarily get a shout out. So I want to take a chance to thank all the volunteers and those who were voluntold. Quite a few this time around that were also voluntold to join. This project, as you've mentioned, and every other event that we put on takes an immense amount of staff work. The day of the event, obviously, days before the event. So the IT department is involved. We haven't spoken about that tonight as well, but the IT department, obviously the Recs and Park department, Public Works, the police department, finance department, my department. There's a lot of people involved in that. And of course, there's always rain in the forecast at some point. So there are plan A's, plan B's, plan C's, plan C and a half, plan D, pivot back to plan A. Should we also do this instead? So there's a lot of mental energy that's also put forward. Thankfully, you don't get to see any of that you just see a great event and enjoy yourself, and so does everyone else. So I want to take the opportunity to thank all the staff that are here now that helped with that and continue to thank our staff. With that, I'm going to move on and pivot back to me before the next report, but I'm going to move on to Recs and Park, let you continue talking about Oyster Stroll a little bit, and also Fall Fest. Give us a little update on what you've got, Abby.
I was actually going to give no report because I feel like I have taken enough of your time this evening with the historic structures report, but yes, so we just concluded obviously 2 major events in 2 weeks. And so thank you for your support and your understanding. As we endeavor into those projects, we certainly love to put ourselves out into the community, and we love the chance to work cooperatively with other departments as well. So it really shows you what this little city can accomplish when we all work together. So thank you for continuing to support that. And I will leave it at that because, again, I have taken enough real estate on a Ravens game tonight. Try not to look at Tony.
Staff has received the message. Okay, so Councilmember Cavachi mentioned the opioid response protocol project. I'm going to have the chief talk a little bit about that, but I want to just put in context why this is so significant, and it really comes down to one word, which is leadership. So Chief Ledwell has coordinated with a variety of entities, nonprofit and county entities in the area to try to address the many ways that we can help, and what he calls harm reduction, help deal with some of the issues related to the opioid crisis that we experience in the county and specifically in the city of Westminster. And those entities were always interested in working together, and they were to an extent, but the extent that this particular protocol project is entirely the chief's vision, and then also execution as well. And that leadership is so critical and important to the residents in Westminster and frankly to Carroll County as well. So I mentioned the grant opportunity that the group was able to secure. The chief didn't necessarily secure those funds, but it's the chief's leadership that got to a place where those funds were able to be secured and utilized in this community in a very real way. I feel very confident that we're going to have measurable results later to show how the leadership has helped those who are suffering from this crisis in our area. So, Chief, I'm going to let you give your report in general, but if you could just quickly talk about what the protocol's involved in. I don't have some of those details.
Yeah, sure. So the CDC has something called Overdose Data to Action. They call it OD2A, which is a cooperative agreement to fund things like this. So through the health department, through Debbie Finch, who is the alcohol and drug abuse prevention specialist with the health department now, we started coordinating this effort, and they were able to secure about $309,000. What that will fund is a software system called Cordata Community Navigation Platform, which I researched and located in Ohio. Cordata had healthcare software that they modified to address the opioid epidemic through data-driven programs focused on addiction and mental health. And you can read about that on their website, cordatahealth.com/deflection. So we're hoping that this product will help the key stakeholders to effectively communicate and coordinate our efforts to address this issue. For example, there are many entities in the community that are working on this. You got the hospital, you got the health department, you got mobile crisis, you got us, you got LEAD, you got the state attorney's office. So what this will do is it'll create a coordination system, software product that is data-driven, that will be able to kind of track the progress and who's coordinating what follow-up efforts and what repeat addresses we have, et cetera, so that we can concentrate our efforts on that. So that's one thing. It'll also fund 2 additional peers in recovery to cover the 24-hour overdose period. So we have mobile crisis. Mobile crisis works 2 shifts, 8 to 4 and 4 to midnight. But anywhere from midnight till 8 a.m., there's no coverage. So the police go out, they respond, we do our best, we ask the protocol questions, we follow it to the health department for later follow-up. This will provide 24-hour coverage. So we'll have a peer in recovery to be able to respond and to interact and to hopefully engage with the individuals in overdose. It'll fund a full-time social worker to work out of the Westminster Police Department and to assist us with our response and follow-up with not only overdose, but with mental health calls for service. So it's kind of a direction that the country's been moving in, a quick response team approach. These funds will fund a full-time social worker to work with us on this initiative. It'll also provide overtime for our officers to work on a quick response protocol and any follow-ups. So if we need to coordinate some or have some more targeted efforts, we'll have overtime money for that. We're also purchasing software that will help us be self-sufficient in cracking cell phone passwords. Whenever we have a fatal overdose, sometimes they get the cell phone cracking we rely on the county to do for us. They've got such a backload. Sometimes we get put on a 6-month waiting list. So this will allow us to crack our own cell phones following a search warrant and be able to try to figure out who dealt the fatal concoction in the fatal overdose. So we're getting all these things. We're also working on a training program that's standardized for first responders to help combat compassion fatigue and to help us to build a best protocol model for response to these types of issues. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that funding will provide.
Did you have anything else?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I know real quick, just to follow up a little bit on the details on the bank robberies. So what occurred is we had the second bank robbery on the 7th. The MO was very similar to the first one. On the second one, we got a very distinct vehicle description. We saw on video, we followed the video trail. They got in the Walmart parking lot. In the Walmart parking lot, they got into a very distinct silver Honda Civic with a black hood and a wing on the back. So we pushed this information out to our neighboring jurisdictions. A few hours later, the sheriff's office and the Hampstead police were in a trailer park in Hampstead working on another case, and they were in a tight lane, and the suspects drove past them on this tight lane. My understanding is that it was so tight that they could kind of just inch through. So that they're looking at this car as it's kind of inching past them, and they're like, well, wait a minute. So they detained them. We were able to positively ID them through the video surveillance. We had search warrants on the car and on their residence. They lived in that trailer park. We were able to collect significant evidence tying them to both the bank robberies, both the Farmers and Merchants and the New Windsor State Bank from the 23rd of September, and they were charged on both those cases. We also got some support from the Frederick resident agent of the FBI in doing some technical stuff to build a stronger case. But I believe we have a really good case for both of these and the arrests. Unfortunately, the newspaper published the robberies, but they didn't publish our arrests after the fact. Other things, October 1st was a legislative mark for some of the legislation that directly affects police departments. Specifically, it limits some search warrant ability at residents. One of the significant things that it does is it makes police officer personnel records not completely protected. So before, a lot of personnel records were protected. If you had a Freedom of Information Act request, it's not necessarily the case. There are certain parameters around that, but we've already started to receive PIAs, particularly from news sources regarding records. There's also some other things about things we got to post through victim services. We have to charge on a criminal citation for a lot more misdemeanors than before versus a custodial arrest. And we have to do certain reporting to the governor's office. So those things all took place along with some other legislative changes on October 1st. We're working on several administrative projects. We're working on a workload analysis regarding our patrol sectors and whether we should realign them to create better response time and workload balance. We've trained all our patrol supervisors at CN1 level and NCIC access. This allows our night supervisors to enter missing persons, felony crime bolos, urgent warrants, and stolen property in NCIC while our dispatchers are not working. We're working on the HQ emergency generator bid submissions, and we're purchasing our 12 mobile radio replacements and hammering out the details of the body worn camera bid. We also identified and charged the 2 juveniles with spray painting in the city park and in the other surrounding locations. We're still looking for the suspects in another incident. And myself and Major Gibson are scheduled to go to the Maryland Chiefs Professional Development Conference in Ocean City, October 17th through the 20th. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chief, for your leadership on the opioid response protocol project. Those are real people that we're talking about helping, and we really appreciate your leadership there. Okay. Tonight we had a resolution about water allocation and a conversation about how challenging the water allocation is in general. And so I'm going to pivot over now to the Public Works Department and just remind everyone that the solution for that is the Pure Water pilot project, the concept of which was entirely created by our Public Works Director, Jeff Glass. So also want to thank him for the leadership there. He continues to make sure that that project's on time as much as possible, because that is the solution for our growth moving forward. I see that we need to move on with the time, council members. So Mr. Glass, do you have anything for us?
So I'd love to take up a lot of time. My only report is that it's 7-0.
Oh, come on. You're killing me. Don't tell me. Oh, you are killing me.
That's what I have to report.
I texted my entire family. I said, do not any scores. So
It's best you don't know what's going on.
that's not funny.
All right, moving on. We do not have an IT report, an HR report, or a housing report tonight. Mark, have you got a planning report?
Historic District Commission approved both the historic tax credit and facade improvement program for 116 East Main. This is the future of Ellen Spirits. They also approved the facade improvement application for 121 East Main. They did review the demolition permit for 288 East Main Street and requested the applicant provide archiving information for this structure that's proposed to be demolished. There's no recommendation yet for whether they approve the permit or not. They want this archiving report first. Staff is finalizing the Sustainable Communities Renewal applications due at the end of this month. This is a joint effort with Public Works and Police Department and Housing, all elements as part of this application.
And also Main Street Maryland is partnering, I can't say, with Maryland Tourism for a social media campaign called Main Street Monday. Each Monday for 33 weeks, a different Main Street of Maryland community is highlighted on tourism's social media account, and Westminster is picked for October 19th to be highlighted. So we're providing some pictures and video for that. We just found this out last Friday. I will forward any information to you once I get it. Okay,
It's got to be whatever that Monday.
that's it.
That concludes, Mr. President, the department. Nope, finance, have you got any?
Finance has no report tonight. Thank you.
That concludes our departmental reports, Mr.
All
President.
right, very good. Thank
Living
you.
is my favorite.
Thank you. Final item on our agenda, citizen comments, when we invite the public to address the mayor and council on any issues pertaining to tonight's agenda. I see no one present here this evening, still in the audience, so we will dispense with any further discussion of that. And so that concludes our agenda and the meeting. We're going to, and with that, without objection, we're adjourned. And at least I got the gavel down before Mr. Black is completely out the door.
Mark,
God.
when is the Monday municipal?
The 19th.
19th.
That's a Tuesday.
Recording stopped.
Is it really?
Yeah, so is it October 19th? Because the 19th
That's what
of.
it said on the.
Okay, all right. 'Cause I'm like, I have a meeting